Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Heather MacArthur thinks it's time to start selling your genius. Today, she'll tell us why. Heather, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Heather, you begin your book, and your book is entitled Low Man on the Totem Pole, by saying career fluidity is the new game in town. What does that mean?
Well, I think, everyone's been traditionally trained to think of it as this career ladder of I do one thing and I build myself up vertically throughout that, and then retire with the gold watch. And now, because of technology and all the ways that the organizations are changing so quickly, and that just keeps increasing in pace, organizations are looking for more people who have the ability to adapt to change, try on different hats, not just move vertically, but move horizontally, maybe take a step back. It's more about the dimension of your experience, and that provides you with a broader understanding of what's happening in the company, the economy, the customer base, and that sets you up to be more agile for them. So they're looking more and more for people that have that fluidity. And I think it also ties to the fact that companies will cycle through employees in a different way. They're not all getting gold watches. Even if they're great performers, they might go through a reorg and be asked to leave and then hired back later. So having more of a sense of I need to go where the work is and create demand for my work sets people up for better success.
You mentioned that employers need to get a return on their investment in less time. But since most of us are employees or on that side of the fence, why are we concerned about this? What does that mean to us?
I mean, a big thing that I try to push for everybody is to get everyone to think like business owners. And we kind of forgot that over the last couple of decades. There's this idea that we go to work and the company is supposed to take care of us. The reality is business was always set up where we come in, we're getting paid to provide a service. The people we work for, they're our customers. So as a business owner, you should be very concerned and curious as to what it is that your customers are looking for and what they may need. That's what keeps you in business as long as possible.
It sounds like, to use a baseball analogy, we should see ourselves maybe more as the utility player, and that being the player who today he's an infielder, tomorrow he's an outfielder, and 2 days later maybe he specializes in pinch hitting, but he has to play more than one position.
Yeah, and he can specialize or she can specialize in baseball, but if that's their industry. But yeah, having a broader sense of what might be needed. And, it's interesting because if you look at the game of baseball, the positions really haven't changed in a long time. But if you compare that to any industry, really, a lot of the roles that exist today didn't exist 10 years ago. And the ones that you may be working in right now may not be needed 10 years from now, but something else will be. And, a lot of people talk about, robots are coming to kind of take our jobs. And I see it as it's really no different than any other time. It's just the nature of what people need from other people is going to be different than what may have been needed 100 years ago, 10 years ago.
And basically, and this can be either good news or bad, employees who don't accept this, and I guess we don't really have much of a choice, it's not like do you accept or not, will basically be left out and are going to be kind of frustrated and annoyed at the system because they're not getting what they think they're entitled to, but basically they didn't read your book, and that's the trouble. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. Just read the book and it'll fix everything. I think you said an important word. You said entitled, and what's funny is there's a lot of articles right now about the new millennial generation being entitled, but I've really seen this entitlement across all generations because we've forgotten what business was supposed to be set up for. So I'm working with a lot of people coming out of a layoff in the very kind of senior or twilight years of their career, and they're in shock. They feel everything has been done unfairly, and I don't blame them. I get that they've been kind of playing in a game where retirement was guaranteed, the gold watch was guaranteed as long as you showed up and did a good job, and the game changed maybe 5 years ago. And I think what happened is we got a little complacent in terms of watching the shape of where business was. You know, country itself really started off on much more kind of a spirit of capitalism where it was supply and demand. And I think we just kind of delegated that to the companies that we work for and figured they'll figure out the supply and demand. And we weren't watching whether or not the supply and demand for our skills was draining away and we needed to create something else. And that's where I see people just feel like they're entitled to something better. The company should have done something different. And I get that. 15 years ago, you were right. But today, that's not the way things are going.
And the good news about that is that you're telling us this in our show and in your book, Low Man on the Totem Pole, so that we can really be prepared for it. And that's the way the world is. If we know something ahead of time, if we know what stocks are going up or going down, we can take advantage of it. If we know this is going to happen, hopefully through talking to you today and going through your book, we'll be better prepared for it, or at least alert to some of the signs that it's coming and putting ourselves in a better position for what we are going to see. As I said to you before the show, Heather, this is our 30th anniversary show. We've now been on the air for 30 years. And I recall at least 10 years ago, one of our guests was talking about someone going into the first grade. And they said when these people graduate from high school, which would be about 12 years, half the jobs that are available to them today as first graders will no longer be around. And that's a pretty scary thought that in 12 years, some of the jobs that we would have and be, thought of as a typical job. And of course, many people going to school want to be teachers, firemen, policemen, nurses, doctors. But many of the other jobs are going to be brand new jobs, webmasters, web creators, having to do with computers, having to do with science, the big STEM projects that we're seeing in math and science. So the world is changing quickly, and we better read your book to be ready for it.
Well, and I want to say I don't necessarily see that forecast as scary. Growing up, hearing that my options were to be a teacher, a lawyer, or a doctor, I felt trapped. I didn't want to do any of those things. And the idea that any first grader right now gets to create whatever future, what kind of business they want, as long as they can create a demand for it, I think that's exciting. And I think that's a little bit to human nature of we want certainty, and so we want to know what something looks like. But honestly, as kids, we didn't need that level of certainty. We need a little stability, but we didn't need that level of certainty. We were very creative as children. We were much easier to fill in the blanks with something that would fill in the gap with something colorful and exciting if what we saw didn't kind of pan out or didn't have all the information we needed. So I think tapping back into that creativity is really what we can do even as adults, and not wait for the next generation to come through and do that.
Heather, we want our audience to know if they're just tuning in, they're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, and today we're speaking with Heather MacArthur, author of Low Man on the Totem Pole. Heather, where can we get the book, and is there a website where we can find out more information?
Yeah, you can get the book on Amazon as well as iBooks, and you can also check out we've got a bi-monthly podcast where we give more information that builds off the book and have some guests on Blog Talk Radio.
And for everyone out there, this is obviously a very key book, because if you need more job fluidity, if our job options are going to be changing, the faster you can get ready for this, you're going to be the one prepared. You're going to be the one rolling with that tide rather than fighting it, being frustrated, being annoyed, and probably coming out on the negative side of things. You mentioned that we should think more like a boss than an employee. But I was thinking before the show, if someone said to me, think like a dancer, I don't know how a dancer thinks. So is there like a cheat sheet or some place where we can get advice, or is it in your book is there a way we can think more like the boss, or could you give us some direction?
Yeah, absolutely. The book is actually structured in a way to think of your whole career from the perspective of a business owner, and that it all came from back in, I think it was 2001, 2002. I had gone through two layoffs, the recipient of them, and what I noticed going into consulting, kind of involuntarily, is that all of a sudden I started to drive things like a business owner, and when I came back internal and was working as an employee, I realized that thinking like an employee really set me up to be passive and reactive to whatever other people were setting up for me. And because I thought like this person where at any point in time, this work could go away. How do I create demand? I started to realize this actually makes me better to work with. I'm less frustrated. I have less expectations of my own managers, my own team members. They're all customers. So the book really walks through what that process could look like and apply it to your own career.
And you mentioned in a sense of good news that we create our own destinies. So, but we just have to be able to go along with the change that's coming rather than fighting it, realize that because we say we don't like to work on a computer, it's not going to go away. The rest of the world just keep using the computer, the cell phone, etc., and we're going to be standing in the corner. So we just kind of have to go with the flow. But the good news is we can create many new things that probably years ago we couldn't. Is that the gist of it?
Yeah, I think people underestimate how resourceful they really are when push comes to shove. And, there's a certain level that we don't like change because we're afraid of the unknown, but the brain is malleable. So to say that, well, I'm not good with change, I think is wrong. I think to be afraid of change, that's one thing. And I used to get brought in to help teams kind of calm down. I used to always see it as they were on the beach building a sandcastle. The waves came, wiped it all down, and sucked them out in the ocean and then spat them out. And I had to come get them to calm down and build sandcastles again. And I'd say in the last 10 years, it's not like that anymore. The wave came, brought them out in the ocean, and then it's not going to take them back to the beach. There's no more sandcastles. You're in the ocean. The waves of change just keep coming. So learn to swim, learn to surf, get a helicopter, fly above the ocean, but stop crying about the sandcastles are gone.
And again, the good news is that if you're among the first ones and you're hearing it, you're reading Heather's book, Low Man on the Totem Pole, by our guest, Heather MacArthur. If you're reading this and you're aware of it, it's like knowing ahead of time that this stock is going up or another stock is going down, and you can gear your investments and your life plan accordingly. Now, what do you mean when you say change is a skill, not an event or a process?
Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of it is this idea of, do you know how to recognize what change is coming your way? And, before it was change happens so sporadically that people kind of just focus more on getting over it. And now employers are looking for not just do you ride with the change, do you go with the flow, but do you create the change that's needed? Previously, companies would compete by saying, we've been around forever. Your family has shopped here for 100 years, and we're reliable. And now that marketing message doesn't get as much traffic. Now we've got the newest thing. We're the ones that are disrupting the way things are done. And, who knows what it might change to later, but right now that's what's selling. And, to see people who, what I see them do is kind of like resisting the change quite a bit and then going along with it, but just waiting till the next change hits. It's a really stressful way to live. So what I usually recommend people to do is get creative, start thinking about what change you think needs to happen. And as a business owner, you're thinking on behalf of your clients. You want to look for what could their future look like through the use of my services or my skills. And that's a very empowering way to approach work versus the defensive kind of waiting for the ball to drop.
It is, and I'm glad you mentioned that because when we're doing it this way, we at least have control. Maybe not as much control as we think we have or as much as we would like if we were in a 20-year tenure as a teacher or an accountant or a lawyer. But at least we have control over our life, where someone else is just saying, I know the company is going to be closing up in 6 months or a year and a half. And that's not a great view to look to. Now, do they stick in for the year and a half because they're high on the totem pole, or do they start retraining? It makes life difficult, where if you could get that feeling maybe 4 or 5 years ahead, you can start out and kind of redirect yourself and feel that you're in control, which is obviously much more empowering. Heather, we want to find out more about the low man on the totem pole and how we can avoid being that person. But at this point in the show, we like to remind our listeners that you're listening to The Secrets of Success. My name is Bill Horan. This show is produced at the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. We'll be right back after this brief break.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education
And to finish what I started to get my diploma.
just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Secrets of Success. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Today we're speaking with Heather MacArthur, author of Low Man on the Totem Pole. And before we start talking again to Heather, we just want to remind our audience, this is that show that I've certainly been waiting for. This is our 30th anniversary show. We started back in 1988. Where were you in November of 1988? Think of that date for a while, and things have certainly changed since then. Think of all the new things that have come into play, and it perfectly dovetails with what Heather is saying in our interview today, and how many things are changing and how much faster they're changing. And hopefully, if you get hold of her book, Low Man on the Totem Pole, you'll be among the people who are ready for the change that's happening now and certainly going to be happening in the future. Heather, you mentioned in the book that we operate on a sliding scale from fearful to loving. What does that mean? How does that affect our work life?
Yeah, what I notice when I'm coaching people or I'm working with organizations is that when fear gets a hold of us, we either come from a survival mode, which is everyone kind of is dangerous and everything is dangerous, and our defensiveness is at an all-time high. And what that means is our midbrain is making all our decisions. And our midbrain's really set up for physical survival, not interpersonal survival. And in most people's workplaces, it really is about interpersonal survival, not keeping yourself safe in the hallways physically. It's the looks in the meeting. It's whether or not you're even brought into the meeting. It's whether your boss is happy with your work. It's all those types of things. And so when fear triggers us, we start to go to what we would do to keep ourselves physically safe, which is the fight, flight, or freeze. The next phase, if we feel somewhat, sure of ourselves, we go into looking good mode, and this is where, we're really on top of things and we're really friendly to people, and our best self seems to be showing up. But the minute somebody threatens how good we look, all gloves are off, and what we tend to do is either passive aggressive things by kind of throwing them under the bus, not answering their phone. Just kind of staying away from them, and or shooting their ideas down in a meeting. We start to see people as they're against us versus for us. And what really is needed to bring our best selves in an interpersonal world is to show up with love, with hope, with confidence. And I don't mean that in like just a soft kind of cuddly way. It's that by bringing that out in yourself, you tend to bring out your own confidence, your own sense of the bigger picture. Your brain moves from the midbrain to the frontal lobe, which is a lot younger than the midbrain. So it takes a lot to move there if your fear has been triggered constantly. But the frontal lobe is all about, let me step back and see the bigger picture. Let me assume good intent and see what the best choices are. And let me not become triggered by other people and reactive. And I like to tell people, by being in that mode, what you're doing is you're making sure that you're the thermostat versus the thermometer. You're setting the temperature at a nice, comfortable temperature, and you're making sure that that's where you stay. Where when a lot of people are in that survival or that looking good mode, they're very much a thermometer. And I'll know it by the way that they describe things. They'll say things like, well, Heather, you don't understand. They did this or they did that. And what that tells me is the environment got too hot. I had to raise the temperature. A thermostat doesn't do that. The thermostat just works harder to bring the temperature down.
So what is, repeat that rule for us. We want to be the thermostat, not the thermometer.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We always want to take away from every show that's simple enough to remember. And I think, Heather, and we've heard this obviously from many guests, the more we can get ourselves aligned with the things we like to do, where there's no fear. For some people, giving a talk is very fearful. They would hate to stand up in front of a room. Well, naturally, a teacher does this every day. A public speaker does it. A radio host, a TV announcer, etc. This is something they don't mind. They feel accomplished at. They can do. These are skills, I guess we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we like to do where we can get, and you use the word in the book, in the flow? so that we can just enjoy what we're doing. We really don't see time go by. We're not looking at the clock every 5 minutes to say how much longer do I have to work. Am I grasping that correctly?
Yeah, and I think everybody has something that they're genius at and that they love and that they're passionate about. And when you're in the flow, you really, the talent's kind of coming through you. And you know what, that might be something that you decide to get paid for and it becomes your work, or it's just something that you do in your life. I always say, you want to know what you're up to in life and how work should serve that. And the people that I find that are really burned out are using work to be their end-all purpose, yet they're choosing work that is more of a paycheck than is their lifelong passion. And I don't think there's anything wrong with choosing work that's actually for a paycheck that supports your life or your family or your travel. But you should know that that's what you're choosing. And when I'm coaching with people, I've got one gentleman who he's all about traveling and he doesn't want to stress about work. So he works at the patent office as an agent, and he's good at his job. It's not his end-all be-all passion, but it gives him a lot of vacation time, and he gets to use his brain at least a little bit. He's in flow when he's on vacation, but he also respects the fact that he's not willing to take certain risks, like go travel for a living and get paid to write up articles. He wants a certain level of stability with the money that he's got coming in. So this is the compromise that he made, but because he knows he's doing that intentionally, it works really well for him. Where the people that I find that are frustrated are kind of expecting the work to feed their soul, but aren't really willing to do those risks.
Heather, once again, we want our audience to know, if you've just tuned into the show, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, and our guest today is Heather MacArthur, author of Low Man on the Totem Pole. She's preparing us for the future and what we can expect in our work environment. And Heather, can you tell us the website and where we can get the book?
Yeah, it's on our website is lowmanonthetotemPole.com. And also, the book is available on Amazon as well as iBooks.
And as we tell our audience every week, we try to present concepts to you to get you thinking, but you have to take action, and that's the way you're going to prepare for the future. Your first step of action, go to the website, perhaps go out and get a copy of the book, maybe go to the library and get a copy. Get a little better prepared, even if it's not 100%, maybe 40%, 20%, or 82%, but you'll be more ready for the future. You'll be talking to people about it, and they'll start looking to you and say, this person is kind of alert to what's coming. They're ahead of the curve. And, of course, that's what we all want to be, a little bit ahead of the curve, make the good investment. And if we're investing the rest of our life doing something, whatever that might be, it better be something we enjoy and that we like. And if you read Low Man on the Totem Pole, you'll have a lot better shot at it. Heather, you mentioned about looking for fears that hold people back. Should I be looking at someone else's fears to see what they've held back? Or is this looking in the mirror for ourselves? And what are we looking or hoping to see?
I mean, I always say look at yourself first. I mean, if you don't really understand yourself, you're not going to have the compassion to look at a person who's showing up fearful, and it'll just end up creating more fear in you. So the more you know from yourself, I think when it comes to work, it's common fears are: am I going to lose face in front of people? If you're caught up in, I need to make sure that I look good for everybody, and I need to have the answer. Those types of fears, that gets in the way at work. The other one is just a fear around finances. If you're constantly worried about where your finances are, then it's really hard to engage in work in a calm way. You'll end up asking for raises and promotions out of desperation. It'll feel very one-sided versus I'm recommending you put me in this position because here's how I'm going to help you. It's a very different place to come from. And I'm not saying that coming by good finances is an easy thing to do, but just know that when you're coming from that fear, you're probably not showing up as your best person.
You mentioned that we overvalue what we do best. How do we do that? Let's say I'm a good dancer. What happens with that? Do we put too much stock in it? Do we think everybody can do it?
We kind of see it comes up in a couple of things. Is that we think that because we're doing this so great, that somehow we're better than others, and I think that's what sets people up, especially in this kind of climate. Collaboration is really how people are looking to get work done, and so we tend to see we have to be the end all be all, which puts a lot of pressure on us. And I always recommend value what you bring to the table, understand what you don't bring to the table, and look for the people who complement that. it sets you up to be a much easier person to work with. People kind of recognize that you see your greatness, but at the same time seeing their greatness. There's room enough for everybody. It makes other people feel safe to work with you. And when they calm down and they can focus on kind of what they do well instead of focusing on politics or, am I going to get this brownie point or are you going to get this brownie point, then both of you get to create better work together.
You say stop climbing a ladder and build a web. What does that mean?
Well, that goes back to, the old adage was climb that ladder as fast as possible. And, I've sat in interviewing rooms with, decision makers, and what used to be the green light, oh my gosh, this person got promoted within a year and he's jumped 2 levels. Like let's promote, let's hire him or let's promote him because he's clearly, clever. Now it's seen as, okay, well, that's concerning. Did they get promoted too soon or do they have experience in any other areas? And so that's why I go back to really having a dimensional work experience is really build that web of different industries, different companies, or just different positions within a company so that they can see, wow, yes, you may come and bring what I call transferable skills, the ability to lead, the ability to organize, whatever it may be. But you know how to apply those in a lot of different situations. And that's what makes you somebody who's an attractive employee to hire.
I'm thinking now, perhaps people out there who would never think of joining a networking group or one of those social groups that look toward business development or at least different professions meeting one another may be much more interested after hearing this interview and or going to Low Man on the Totem Pole and reading your book, because they're going to be a little more concerned that they may be an attorney today, but maybe 5 years from now, that will be an entirely different profession, as all professions are changing, or maybe they're an accountant, etc. And perhaps it's a good time to meet a few other people, get out there and let other people meet you and know what you can do in the world. Heather, we want to thank you and ask you, leave us with one tip for tomorrow. What should we do to get this process started in our life?
I mean, the biggest one that I'll ask anybody who ends up seeking out career coaching from me is, what are you up to in life? And I'll ask them, it's your last day on earth. I was 120. It's your last day on earth. You live a nice long life. What do you want to say about your life? And then how would you like to look back and see that you used work to serve that purpose versus you just blindly let work kind of put you in different situations? So, just spend some time thinking about that. What do you want your life to be about? And then choose what work to do and what position to go after and let it support you.
I like that, and I think if we all do that, we're all going to be in a much better place. Once again, if you like what you've been hearing today, you've been listening to Heather MacArthur, MacArthur. The book is Low Man on the Totem Pole. Heather, we want to thank you for being with us today, and we want our audience to know that you've been listening to the 30th anniversary show on the Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Thanks for listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.